calling from a 212 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 212. I hear you breathing.
It is you.
Is this me?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Oh, that's weird. My number's a 219 number. It's coming up as a 212.
I misread it. I apologize.
Wow.
Emma
But
messing
actually,
everybody
it's
up because she's so flabbergasted by that compliment to me.
Well, hi. My name is Sam. I'm from Northwest Indiana, which is 219, not 212.
Yes.
I called like 6 months ago, and I spoke with Sam, and I think it was a good conversation. He just kind of like, at the end, kind of just hung up. The reason I call is because I would consider myself a leftist.
Okay.
Not necessarily what the title of the video said that was flipped. It said that I was a libertarian. I'm not, and I have a huge critique on capitalism. So I'm not, a capitalist, but I am on the side of individual freedom. And you guys have mentioned a few times that our civil liberties are under attack in many ways, and I do think that us on the left should side on the side of individual freedoms, and that's the reason that I can't convince myself to think that we should be pro-regulation of guns or anti-Second Amendment. Maybe you guys have a better way of explaining that to me, but that's my point of view.
I mean, just
you don't
real
think
quick. I would just say real quick, like I think I think there is a small individual liberty right that I wouldn't mind seeing, like for rights to like a pistol or like a type of rifle or shotgun or something like that. I absolutely think, and this is where I'm more of a commie, that the state has the full right to tell businesses that you can't make these implements of like mass death. I think that is. I don't care about
And
the
that's not
individual right to that
individual.
sort of stuff.
That's not even individual rights too. Like that's just state regulation of dangerous weaponry. But I'm with you that I've like changed my opinion a bit on that, and I think individuals should have the right to own a gun, especially if they pass checks and stuff like that.
Yeah, like I don't like that there's even frankly like capitalists in charge of the arms industries. I think that stuff should be changed, and maybe you can be after you go through a hunter and firearm safety course administered by the state, have access to those sorts of weapons. I think that would be my compromise.
Caller, do you think that those checks and those safety protocols, do you think those infringe on individual freedoms?
So I do think that they are unconstitutional, and I've heard many arguments on why the Constitution should be thrown away, and I wouldn't maybe I would agree with a lot of the reasons why, but I think that we should center those arguments on an individual's freedoms, and because
censor
that once center, I mean not censor, center.
Oh, okay.
Center, he said.
Yeah, so
center.
Yeah. So that's why I think that it is a little bit, or not a little bit, it is unconstitutional. And I might have a conservative mindset. I don't think I do. I was on the right before in the past for religious purposes, and I've slowly started. I wouldn't even say slowly at this point, since I've been listening to your show for maybe even up to like 4 years at this point. I've converted, fully, and I speak up to my family on why they should be more on the left. And, to me, I see a lot of hypocrisy on the right, and on the libertarian side, and really on the neo-lib centrist side. And I try to stay away from, personal, epistemological hypocrisy. And that's why I can't convince myself to think that someone should be regulated on their right to own a weapon, or a gun, which is, our Second Amendment. And maybe there's,
but there are always regulations on rights. Like, again,
even the First Amendment, technically. I mean, you can't put people in danger by saying everyone needs to go to this address right now and name that exact person. You can't really do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. But I think those regulations are more on the act if that's a way to explain it, like you can't say, you can't actively say and be serious about there's a fire in here or there's an active shooter and lie about that, or say,
okay, caller, Sam, can you
convincingly at an airport? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So do you think you can buy a grenade launcher?
I think it should be okay to own. Yeah.
No. Well, I mean,
we disagree on that, but
yeah.
But the Second Amendment, which it seems like your conversation, you're completely basing yourself on the Second Amendment, and I mean, obviously, because that's
the problem I wanted to zero in on.
But it says right in the Second Amendment, the word, like, it says well regulated. It literally says that it says
well regulated militia, and that's where I'll disagree.
But who cares about the Constitution?
Yeah, that's the bigger point. Who cares about if it wasn't the Second Amendment? Would that change the way you feel about it, or is that just kind of something to play it on? It really?
Well, I mean,
no, it would. It would, because I do think that our the Bill of Rights gives us the right, to protect ourselves against tyrannical government, and that's why I think the First Amendment. I believe fully in freedom of speech. But I believe once you say the wrong thing, then you're committing a crime. And it's the same thing with guns. Once you commit a crime, or once you, violate someone else's freedoms with violence, then you've committed the crime. Then you're at violation.
Right.
Then you can't have your guns.
It is the job. It is
not before. It's kind of like the minority. Is that what I think that's the movie, right? The Minority Report, where they try to identify who's going to commit a crime before.
But you could say the same thing. But you could say the same. You could say the same thing for speech. Take my example. Where I said you can't give an exact address and name somebody for a mob to kill. I mean, they didn't commit any crime. No crime is really committed. No life is lost until that mob actually goes to that address and kills the person. Yet you agree that that type of speech is wrong, even if nothing ends up happening at that address to that person.
Well, if I can just jump in for a second.
The act of that is what I see wrong, and I'm happy to hear these arguments, and I'll go back and I'll listen to it, some more, because I'm willing to be convinced. Otherwise, every time I try to come up with an argument on why guns should be regulated, I always feel like I'm being a hypocrite with my ideology that I carry in other aspects. But I will, Matt. That's a good point, and I'll go back and listen to it, and maybe change my mind some more, but that's my main point.
All right, Sam, we're gonna hang up and then we'll respond, because we gotta wrap. This is the final call of the day, but I do, again, it's nice. It's good that you're thinking about these topics critically, and don't we may
we called you a libertarian.
Yeah, we didn't mean to call you a libertarian. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
That's the worst insult you can give somebody.
Thank you all. Left is best.
Left is best. Yeah, I mean, look, I think the government has to balance the prevention of violence with rights, and I err more on the side of prevention of violence in terms of something like owning a grenade launcher or a tank is not necessary for a human being, and it also indicates a propensity to then act on that violence. But that's different than a baseline right, which I'm understanding of the caller's inclination towards.
Well, I would say I think I could be in favor of grenade launchers being legal if they were the only guns that were legal, if that was the only kind of gun you could get. But to the caller's larger point or larger premise, I don't know. I feel like the framing of individual rights is very loaded. And it's the way we talk about things like this, when in reality, there are collective rights, there are individual rights, there has to be a sort of balance between those two. And we find ourselves constantly giving, lip service to this idea of the most important rights are the individual rights, which in the American political sphere are interpreted as the caller might not be a capitalist, but the way we interpret individual rights in this country is very steeped in capitalist neoliberal understanding of rights, in the sense that your individual rights are calculated by whether or not they trump someone else's individual rights. We don't talk about COVID-19 really. We should, and some people do, I should say, public health people do, about the public good and the collective and society and, what it takes to have a healthy public body, generally speaking. We talk about it, whether someone's right to wear a mask, or rather, whether someone's right to expect you to wear a mask so that you don't increase the likelihood that they will get sick overrides your right to not wear a mask because you find it uncomfortable. I can understand how like in a debate class kind of like, let's talk about the Constitution way, that sounds like a really big meaningful conversation, but I think it really shows that we are in a holding pattern that prevents any kind of public dynamism when it comes to these kind of things, because we're just always going to find ourselves like talking about it from the framework of like, okay, not what it takes to have a healthy society, but instead what it takes to ensure that people are finding kind of cohabitation and but it's essentially framed as like a thinly veiled antagonistic relationship with one another and when it comes to their rights. And so, I think that framing it as like, does my right to have a gun, does my right to own a gun supersede other people's right to think that having a gun makes me more likely to do a school shooting or with the school shootings that are happening, et cetera, et cetera. All those things I think are, questions that we have. But if the reality is like, why does everyone in this country need a fucking gun? Why does everyone in this country need to have like an AR-15 is a deeper social question about what it means than like to live in a country where everyone feels like they are at war with one another for resources, for rights, for etc.
Yeah, I'm curious to know more about like if the founding fathers just didn't put the Second Amendment in there, he wouldn't have the same feeling towards guns. Is interesting to me because I'm personally like I think
I resent the
I understand like the right to bear arms sort of desire, regardless of whether like the founding fathers okayed it as what he said.
The Constitution sucks. It sucks.
Yeah, exactly.
Our Constitution sucks, dude. And every time you have any conversation about anything, even when you explain to people you're a communist or something, you think America sucks, they want to ask you about the First Amendment, which is not like to like dig against the caller, but like every time we talk about like should people be allowed to just like lie on the radio or lie in like on in the New York Times op-ed section, it's like, well, what about the First Amendment, freedom of speech? Like, what about it? Our country is dying. Please help. Please help.
I will say the First Amendment does, in terms of from a journalistic point of view, a lot of good journalism that's been done here would have been under attack in like the UK because they don't have that type of, from lawsuits and stuff like that. So that is one area where I'll say it's good, but I agree with you with everything else.
There are individual components. I agree. I am resentful of the mythologizing of it, and
because I don't think that those motives were just to guard against a tyrannical government, shall we say? Because I think the tyrannical government was the one represented by the slave owners who wrote the fucking thing itself, right? Like
99%. I feel like 51% of what the Constitution does nowadays is just reference material for people for why we can't have better things now that we've moved past that point. And the other 40%, or rather 49%, is people explaining why it's okay that our founding fathers were like slave owners and rapists because they wrote it. And that's the only real like purpose it serves for like most people online and like arguments.
Also, sentence structure-wise, Second Amendment, I'm looking at it right now, very badly written. Very badly written.
Let Nicolas Cage steal in real life.